Let me tell you why so many people are here. Let me tell you why there are so many brilliant speakers who've chosen to join us for this event. The reason that people are here is because there is still a faith in Britain that homelessness can be replaced by homecoming, that by coming to this room, it's possible to join in something that will give you a sense of home, a feeling of home. And there is still a belief in Britain that by coming to this room and joining with these people, that it will be possible to gain clarity, a clear vision of what has been lost and what can be gained. National conservatism is, as I think many people intuit, it's a little bit redundant. How can you be a conservative if you don't value your nation? But you all know that for the last 30 years at least, the English-speaking world and Europe as well have been flooded with this idea, this notion that somehow it's possible to be a globalist conservative, that you can be a universalist conservative, that the term conservative could somehow be taken, alienated from the idea of home, the idea of family, the idea of congregation, the idea of nation. That somehow something can be conservative if the world has no borders. That something can be conservative if the world has no particular traditions. That something could be conservative if people can't remember what their own national and religious traditions were about. Now, all of this is not true. And it's brought us to a dead end. And it's ruining Western nations. It's brought us to cultural revolution. And so the first step for a conservative, for a homecoming, the first step has to be to say, look, we've given the idea that what you need to know about politics is the individual's rights, the individual's freedoms. Those are important things, but we've given the opportunity to liberals for 30 years, for 50 years, for 70 years, we've given them the opportunity to show that a society can be constructed out of individuals who don't have natural connections to family, to congregation, to nation. We've tried it. We've tried it, and we know that it doesn't create anything human. Miriam spoke so eloquently about the lack of children in a liberal society in which people think only about the individual. But you can go on and you can say, it's not only that there are no children. There are no children. There are fewer and fewer children with every passing year. But it's not only that. It's not only that. Do these children, when they get older, do they learn about their national traditions? Are they willing? Do they think it's important to serve in the military? Are they raised to believe in manufacturing and making things, actually making something as part of having a fulfilled life? No, they don't. Fewer and fewer do. And so we have to take the idea of the nation and we have to put it back in the center. Now, there's been in Britain over the last few years, there's been a movement to do just this. It began with Brexit, with the idea of national independence. And it continued in 2019 with the Tory platform, which said for the first time, I think, in a long time, that it's everyone in the nation. That it's all parts of the nation. It's not just some particular elite, but it's all parts of the nation that make up the nation. All parts of the nation have to find their place. All of them have to be honored, and all of them have to find their place within a coalition, if it's to be a national coalition. You can be a liberal and have, only individuals thinking about themselves. But if you're a conservative, you have to think about the nation as a whole. Let's take another step. I think that many Brits, many Englishmen, many Brits have lost the thread of the story They've lost the thread of the story of what Britain is. They don't realize, you don't realize, many of you don't understand that all over the world, even to this day, there are people who look to Britain with hope. Let me say that again. Even today, all over the world, there are people who look to this British story with hope. Why is that? I'll tell you, just a few days ago, a friend of mine was not British, a scholar from another country, called me and he said, you know, this NatCon conference in Britain, it's so important. I said, okay, why? Why is it so important? And he said, well, you know, people talk about the greatness of the Greeks. Do you know that the Greeks, that the height of Athenian civilization, the high point that everyone always talks about, it was less than a century long. It was maybe 70, 90 years that you can say the flowering of Athenian democracy that everyone talks about. Now compare that to Britain. Compare that to Britain. Do you know that since the beginning of the Tudors, since Henry VII, at least until World War II, he said, we're talking about 450 years that the English, the British, generation after generation, in every single generation, produced 2 or 3 of the greatest human beings in history. For 300 or 400 years, there's never been a people like the English. There's never been a people like the British. And that gives people hope. Do you know that in Britain gave the world, you know, people talk about the mother of parliaments. Britain gave the world the greatest tradition of political thought and action that we've known. Of course, many of these names are now forgotten. They're not studied. Fortescue, Hooker, Selden, Burke. I'm sure when you think of great political thinkers, you think of other names, but these are the names that you should be thinking about. How about scientists? There's no such thing as modern scientist without Britain, without Harvey and Boyle and Newton and Faraday, and we could keep going. And we could do this for all day long. We could do this for every human discipline. Shakespeare and Donne and Swift and Blake. What is there to modern literature without these names? I could go on, but I want you to understand this. I'm not British. I've never lived in Britain. But like many thousands of people around the world, when Britain is weakened, when Britain is confused, when Britain doesn't know which direction to go, I feel weakened. I feel confused. And when Britain is strong and understands what it is to be British, when Britain is strong, it strengthens all of the democratic countries. It strengthens the entire West. Now, there is this astonishing history of Britain, what it was. And there are many people who want to tell you that that's old history. It's just the past. It has nothing to do with what's going on now. There are many people who want to tell you, focus on the individual, on the economy, focus on it. And I don't mean to deny it. I understand that Britain faces terrible, difficult issues economically. I'm deeply sympathetic. But before anything else, we need to understand that if there is no British people that believes in itself, that believes in its importance to the world, in what it has to contribute to the world, then we see what we've seen. We get to see what we've seen just these last few years. Cultural revolution. What is this cultural revolution about? This woke neo-Marxism. What is it really about? Well, it's about destroying everything that was great about Britain. Of course, it's about destroying everything that was great about other countries too, but here in Britain, yes, it began, I know that this not everybody wants to hear this. It began with the destruction of the idea of God in Scripture. All right, maybe many of you think that that's just fine, that we can live without it in Britain. It continued with the destruction of the idea of the British nation as an independent country, with the destruction of the idea of the traditional family, the destruction of the idea of military service, of having children, of being a part of a congregation. Every one of these things has been turned into something that is evil and wrong, something that you shouldn't be part of. Today, even saying that a man is different from a woman, that they're two different things, that each has that a man has his greatness and a woman has her greatness, and they're not the same thing. Even to say this is something that you're supposed to feel contempt for people who speak like that. Look, loyalty, honor, the sacred. What is a human being who does not feel loyalty, who does not understand what honor is, who doesn't understand what the sacred is? This is the goal of these cultural revolutionaries, to progressively destroy every single thing that is inherited from the past, to make you guilty about it, to make you feel terrible about it, to make you feel like it's not really yours, to alienate you from everything that you have been and everything that you as a people have contributed to history and to the world. What is national conservatism? Before anything else, it's that step forward where you say, yes, there is such a thing as an English nation. There is such a thing as a British nation. And for 1,000 years, this British nation has been a beacon to the world. And I'm going to be part of that. I'm proud to be part of that. It's my inheritance to be part of it. And I'll take up that inheritance and I'll walk forward towards my destiny with that inheritance. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying that and admiring other nations. There's nothing wrong with saying that just as I'm not British and I love the British nation. You too, you can love other nations. But your responsibility is to your own nation. Your responsibility is to your own home, to your own people, to building them up and strengthening them. Now, this idea of the nation, it doesn't mean that we don't care about individuals. I actually think that it means that we care about what's actually significant to individuals. Let me give you some examples. Liberals will tell you, look, how can you possibly be against immigration? If we care about the individual, the freedom of the individual, the equality of the individual, so how can we say that people shouldn't be free to move to England? Hundreds of thousands, millions, any number. How can we say this? We can't say this. As a liberal, maybe you don't feel like you can say it, but as a conservative, your first responsibility as a conservative is to strengthen the people living on this island, to be concerned about national interests, to be concerned about national traditions, to live a life, each one of you, to live a life that strengthens the national inheritance and transmits it on to future generations stronger than as you received it. There's not going to be any agreement about this, because as long as you can't say, no, this island, first and foremost, what's important about it is the English and British civilization that's built here. If you can't say that, you will never be able to regulate immigration, and the future of the country is in doubt. I think the same thing is true for manufacturing, by the way. People say it doesn't make any difference whether you produce computer chips or potato chips, but it isn't true. As a liberal, maybe you have to say, look, free trade is the only way to go. Everyone should be free to do whatever it is that they want. But as a conservative, you have to be able to say, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? The people who live on this island, they have to be loyal to one another. They have to feel that they're part of a single nation. Now, I don't mean to say that necessarily means, socialism. I'm no socialist. I think the idea of a group of people sitting in an office and planning an economy for tens of millions of people is absurd, for all the reasons that you know, all of the Hayek and Milton Friedman reasons. I agree with all of that. But when people step forward and they say, and people have been saying this for days now in the media here, when people step forward and they say, look, what's special about Britain is that, we've always been free traders. We've never thought that we should protect industries, manufacturing. Well, look, I say to you, what are you talking about? Seriously, have you ever read a book of economic history? Have you read even one? The British dominance in the world economy was first and foremost created by 300 years of protectionism, beginning with with Henry VII, beginning with the decision that wool and textiles from the United Kingdom were not going to continue to go to Flanders in order to there be turned into textiles. The beginning of English industry, the beginning of textile and steel in Britain is entirely protected for 300 years. By the way, the same thing is true in the United States. The same thing is true in Germany. That protectionist steps were taken in order to be able to defeat English economics. When the Americans and the Germans began to overtake industry in Britain, it was because Britain was a free trading country and America and Germany were protectionist. Now, I don't say this in order to insist on a particular policy. I say this in order to insist on one thing only. And that what is good for the British people, that is the policy. That's going to have to be the policy. And if free trade is good for the British people, then it should be free trade. And where it's protectionism, it should be protectionism. You can't go to university, take a few courses in abstract theoretical free market economics, read some Hayek, and step forward and answer all of the questions about what for all time is going to be economic policy in Britain. What has to be economic policy in Britain, like industrial policy, like military policy and foreign policy, all of these things have to, and family policy, all of these things have to begin by stepping back and saying there's a real nation here. It's not a bunch of individuals. It's an actual people with an actual inheritance. Yes, an inheritance. You have a king. You have a House of Lords. You have an established church. All of these things are things that are an integral part of Britain. Now, I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be repaired. Restoration, one of the great words of the English political tradition, restoration. Restoration never means going back exactly to what there was in the past. Restoration has to mean that you take the inheritance of the past and you use it in order to improve the present. Of course there's change. There's always change. But right now the direction of change is towards decay and disintegration. Right now, the direction of change is towards loss of attachment to this home that was the home of your people. And with each passing year, that trajectory continues. It becomes clearer and clearer. Now, I know that many people who are here today and many people who are going to be following this at home are unsure about giving up on liberalism. I understand that. Liberalism has been the ideology in Britain and in Europe and in America, the ideology that was supposed to answer all the questions for 2-3 generations now, 3 generations. I understand. And I don't expect that everyone who walks in here is going to simply give up on being a liberal. I don't expect anything like that. That's not what's going to happen here. I'll tell you what is going to happen here. What's happening here today is that we're taking a first step to reconsidering whether liberalism alone, the freedom of the individual alone, can explain the politics of this island and this people. I say that it can't. And I say that with the clarity that is emerging from this cultural revolution, which is destroying absolutely everything in its wake, and everything it sees gets destroyed. With the clarity that's emerging, what's going to happen is that the people who are sitting in this room, those who today say, look, I'm a liberal, I'm for freedom, that's the most important thing. With every passing month, you are going to begin, like many people in the media, begin to say, well, if it's just about freedom and not about the ties that bind me to my family, to my parents, to my children, not about the ties that bind me to the local congregation, not about the ties that bind me to the nation, to its history, to its future, if it's only about the individual doing whatever he or she wants, then what worth is it, all of that? What worth is it? What's the point of having freedom if you've lost the ability to use it for anything that is truly worthwhile, honorable, sacred? What's the point? With every passing month, you are going to become more conservative. I see it already. I hope it doesn't scare you. And the reason I say this is because there isn't really any choice. There isn't any choice. What really is the choice here? If you let everyone do whatever they want, and you tell children from the time that they're small, just do whatever you want, whatever makes you feel good, and you don't teach them about their duties, and you don't teach them about their responsibilities, you don't teach them about their inheritance, and you don't teach them what they would have to do in order to conserve and transmit that inheritance to future generations. If you do not do that, well, you'll end up with all of these incredibly unhappy teenagers that Jordan Peterson writes about, these miserable young men that Peterson writes about, the miserable young women that Abigail Schreier and Mary Harrington and so many others write about. That's where you're going. You don't give them a direction, you don't give them an inheritance, you don't give them a way to make good, a way that will make them feel like they've done good, they've actually upheld the tradition, they've actually upheld their inheritance and turned it into something great, improved it. You don't give them those tools, and they're going to be wretched, miserable young people, confused and without direction. Now here in this hall, among these national conservatives and budding national conservatives and national conservative adjacent and national conservative curious, here in this hall, we gather together the people who are beginning to say, look, you know, I've actually had enough of this. I've had enough. I've had enough of the aimlessness. I want there to be aim and purpose again. And I believe that it can be found in our inheritance. I don't have to go to India to be in an ashram in order to find something that is spectacular and splendid and impressive and grand and great. I can do it right here, in my home. Now, this is going to require not just a reordering of public political life, although it will do that for sure. More than anything else, it requires a reordering of your personal life. It requires you to begin to say, you know what? Getting married, young, having children, many children, raising them to be not just businessmen, people who believe that actually that there's a calling in national service, in the military. This is one of the greatest military nations in the history of the world. It's going to require you telling your children again, you know what, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe actually national service is the beginning for a young man. Just like telling the young women that, it's not dishonorable to have children. In fact, it's the greatest thing that a woman can do. Now, I don't in any way mean to say that everyone has to live according to a particular role. But if you don't understand that you yourself, you need to find a congregation, you need to take your children to a place where there's something greater than just doing whatever it is that you want that's being taught, right? The national public life of the country is going to depend on the decisions that you as individuals make. And as individuals, you are going to become more and more conservative because you don't have a choice. So honored to be allowed to speak with you like this. People should just thank God for the possibility to be able to come to Britain and take part in some of the astonishing greatness of this people, and to be able to talk to you. I believe in your future. I believe that what you're going through now is a time of crisis, but you're going to come out of it. You're going to come out of it as one of the strongest nations in the world. I have no doubt at all. God bless you all. Thank you.